You're done here. My wife fired me. In front of the whole office. No warning. No emotion. Just a badge sliding across her desk. Like I was trash she was done pretending to care about. She called it disloyalty. I called it survival. She thought it was the end. But she had no idea. The storm she just unleashed was mine. It was a Tuesday. One of those crisp, clear mornings that tricks you into thinking the day will be uneventful. I figured I'd be stuck in meetings all day and maybe, if the universe was kind, snag a sandwich that hadn't been nuked into a rubbery mess. I walked into Lakel and Company just like I had every weekday for the past 7 years. Same badge clipped to my belt. Same elevator that gave a familiar creak around the 10th floor. Same receptionist, too. Tight-lipped as always, like she was doing me a favor by saying good morning. Everything felt routine. Until it didn't. Name's Logan Barrett. My wife, well, was my wife, is Sienna Grayson. And yeah, she's also the CEO of Lakel and Company. That's right. My boss used to be the woman I shared a house and a mortgage with. At least, that's how it was until 9:11 a.m. rolled around. I got a calendar ping from Sienna's executive assistant. Subject line, urgent discussion, executive office. I figured it was some kind of project emergency. Maybe a client had gone off the rails. Or, if I wanted to be unrealistically optimistic, maybe it was finally time for the promotion talk I'd been politely pushing every quarter for the past 3 years. But the second I stepped into her office, I knew better. Sienna sat behind her spotless glass desk in a navy blazer with silver trim, like she'd suited up for battle. She didn't even look up, just tapped the corner of a printed email with one of those perfect nails of hers. Her voice? Cold and sharp, like frost on steel. I consider this disloyal. That's the word she used. Not unprofessional. Not dishonest. Not even ineffective. Just disloyal. I looked down at the paper. It was an internal memo from Pennington Nexus, the company I'd quietly interviewed with the previous Thursday. That day, I told Sienna I had a dentist appointment, which, to be fair, wasn't entirely untrue. I had an appointment, just not with a dentist. I opened my mouth to explain, but she cut me off before I got a word out. Don't bother. Security will escort you out. Grab your things. Your badge and building access are revoked, effective immediately. No yelling. No emotion. Just a surgical execution. She slid my badge across the desk like it was Exhibit A. You know what's funny? Getting fired by my own wife didn't even hurt the most. What really cut deep was standing there, under that stale fluorescent light, and realizing I had stopped being her equal a long time ago. I just hadn't seen it. Back when we both started at Lakel, it was different. We were building something side by side. Long nights, eating ramen at our desks, tossing around campaign ideas while folding laundry at home. We were a team. We even gave ourselves a nickname, Barrett and Grayson. Like we were our own brand. I loved who we were back then. But slowly, things began to shift. It wasn't obvious at first. More like a slow drip that wears down stone. She climbed faster. The board noticed her sooner. She started getting added to emails I wasn't even CC'd on. At first, I was proud. Honestly, I was. She's sharp, driven, brilliant. She earned it. But then came the small, quiet ways I got pushed aside. Client dinners I never heard about. Strategy meetings where I was briefed after, not invited. And when the promotions and raises skipped past me, the explanation was always the same. We don't want to appear biased. Biased? I was the one who brought in Richter. I landed the straightest bank account after months of dead-end calls and lukewarm coffee meetings. I even saved $1 million client relationship when one of the junior execs forgot to deliver assets on time. But none of that mattered. Why? Because Sienna and I shared a bed. In her success story, I became the liability. She once told me, after the 3rd time my raise request was denied, that she couldn't be seen promoting her husband. I looked at her and asked, totally serious, then what exactly am I doing here? She didn't answer. But after that, she stopped calling me her husband in meetings. Started introducing me as Logan from Strategy. No last name. No personal tie. Just another name on the org chart. And still I stayed. I convinced myself I was being supportive, that I was helping from behind the curtain. But the truth is, I was slowly being erased, and I let it happen. For 3 years, I submitted those polished quarterly raise proposals. Detailed PDFs, market comps, performance data, client revenue numbers directly tied to my campaigns. And every time, I got the same empty script. Tight budget. Focus is on infrastructure. You're valued. Logan, just not this quarter. Meanwhile, I watched my juniors, the ones who shadowed me, get promotions, bonuses, shiny new offices. One of them even snagged the private parking spot I was promised in my last performance review. Sienna said it was out of her hands. I didn't argue. Not until I did. One night, after another half-hearted conversation about my so-called behind-the-scenes value, I opened my laptop and dusted off my resume for the first time in 7 years. It wasn't out of spite. It was out of self-respect. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Miles at Pennington Nexus. Said he'd been following my work and wanted to chat. They were building an internal strategy team from scratch and needed someone who could lead. I took a half-day off, told Sienna I had to see the dentist. I even wore a tie, packed floss, just in case she asked questions. The interview went great. We talked shop. They'd reviewed my public portfolio, praised my data-first approach. Then Miles leaned in and said, "You've been the ghost behind Lakel's success, haven't you?" I smiled. "I've contributed," I said. He laughed. "You're being modest. Your fingerprints are all over their growth." At the end, he shook my hand and said, "We'll be in touch. And next time, I hope we're meeting as colleagues." Then Tuesday came. Sienna found out. How? No idea. Could have been a loose-lipped HR rep. Maybe an email chain she wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe she just knew. Doesn't matter. What matters is what she didn't do. She didn't ask why. Didn't pull me aside. Didn't say, "Logan, are you unhappy?" Didn't even ask, "Why didn't you tell me?" No. She snapped straight into CEO mode. Pulled my badge. Called me disloyal. Fired me like I was a stranger on her payroll. Quietly, efficiently, without a flicker of doubt. But here's what she never understood. I wasn't interviewing despite her. I was interviewing because I was already hurt. I wasn't chasing a new job for approval. I was searching for air. For someone to actually see me. Not as Sienna's husband. Not as a risk to her career. But as the damn professional I knew I was. Now I'm at home, in sweatpants, sitting in front of my laptop. I opened the final version of my last denied raise proposal. Flipped to the summary slide. It read, "A 25% salary increase will project $4.1 million in additional revenue over 12 months. Timestamp? 8 months ago. Want to guess what I actually delivered? $4.7 million. And that was just from 2 clients, Richter and Crestline. I delivered. I over-delivered. And I got fired for daring to look elsewhere. But there was something Sienna didn't know. Miles wasn't just offering me a job. He wanted me to build something from the ground up. A whole division. My vision. My voice. He wanted me leading branding, shaping campaigns, managing clients, not just executing, but steering the ship. The kind of leadership I hadn't been trusted with at Lakel in years. I stared at the email in my inbox for a few seconds, then typed out my reply. Subject, Thursday's meeting. Message, Thursday still works. Looking forward to it. Logan. I leaned back in my chair, caught a faint glimpse of myself in the laptop screen. Sienna had called it betrayal. Me? I called it choosing myself. And if that made me the villain in her corporate fairy tale, I could live with that. Because I'd rather be the bad guy in her version of the story than disappear completely in mine. It's strange what your mind holds on to when your world starts coming apart. I didn't think about all the late nights I spent fixing someone else's mistakes. I didn't reflect on the dozens of successful campaigns I carried across the finish line. What hit me hardest was the silence, how eerily quiet it got when I reached under my desk for that cardboard box. Yeah, that box. The just-in-case they ever fire me box. I'd left it there for years, always joked I'd use it whenever we moved to a new floor. Turns out it had another purpose. A colder one. I didn't storm out, if that's what you're imagining. No angry packing or slam drawers. I moved slowly, deliberately. Kept it dignified. A framed photo of me and my brother from that hiking trip in Oregon. A coffee mug Sienna gave me 2 years back. It said, "To my favorite strategist." Felt more like a punchline now. A few notebooks, my favorite blue pen, and a ceramic lion paperweight I got at a company retreat. 6 items. 7 years. That's all it took to reduce everything I gave to that place. People stared, but no one said a word. Some looked uncomfortable, maybe a flicker of guilt, maybe just shock. But no one came forward. No one, except Leah. She worked in UX. Brilliant, thoughtful, always kind. As I was sealing the box shut, she slipped a sticky note under my hand. For words, written in green ink. "You didn't deserve this. I folded the note slowly and tucked it into the mug. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't tear up. I just stood there, took one last glance at the office I helped shape, and gave a small nod. To the space. To the silence. To no one in particular. Then I walked out. The elevator ride felt twice as long that day. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was knowing that my own wife was upstairs, acting like I was never there. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something shifting deep inside me. Something letting go. Something new starting to take shape. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped out with the box under my arm. I didn't know if I was carrying quiet defeat or quiet victory. I guess it depends on how you choose to see it. As I crossed the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Miles Pennington, can you meet Thursday? I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. Yes, noon works. And right after I hit send, another text came in, this time from one of the junior client associates. She'd been shadowing me for months. Sharp kid. Lots of potential. Her message. Everyone's talking. What happened? I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I just didn't feel like becoming the latest headline in the office gossip mill. I placed the box gently in the back seat of my car and shut the door. No slamming. No theatrics. Just a quiet kind of finality. You know, when Sienna and I first joined Laquelle, we used to carpool every morning. Same playlist of old school rock. We'd talk about our ideas, our plans, the life we were building. But this last year, separate cars, separate meetings, separate lives. The day she stepped into that corner office, it was like the we in our story stopped existing. I used to believe love could survive anything. Turns out, it can't survive being managed like a subordinate. Driving home, I rolled down the window and let the air hit me square in the face. It felt like exhaling after a 3-year meeting I was never allowed to leave. When I got to my apartment, I set the box down on the kitchen island. I just stared at it. Everything I had brought into that company over 7 years, all reduced to a single cardboard container. That should have felt like failure. But it didn't. It felt like closing the book on someone else's expectations and finally getting ready to write my own. I opened my laptop, clicked New Document, and at the top, typed, what I want now. I didn't fill it in yet, but I would. Because for once, I wasn't waiting on a quarterly review. I wasn't waiting for Sienna to notice my effort. I wasn't hoping for a meeting invite to feel like I belonged. I was going to build my own future, starting Thursday. By the time Thursday came, I'd already read Miles Pennington's email at least 10 times. The subject line still hit different. We've got something you might want to see. Not, we're reviewing applicants. Not, thanks for your interest. No, he already knew. He wasn't testing me. He was inviting me. And now, thanks to Sienna, I had nothing holding me back. No guilt. No secrets. No fear of her walking in the room and deciding I was crossing a line. That morning, I reached deep into my closet and pulled out a blazer I hadn't worn in years. Not the basic one I used for quarterly meetings. This one was tailored, dark gray with a faint plaid lining. It said, I know who I am. I shaved. Like really shaved. That's how much this meant. When I arrived at Pennington Nexus headquarters, I realized right away, this was a whole new level. At Laquelle, the exec team worked out of rented offices in a worn-out tower, beige carpet, and a lovely view of a seafood dumpster. Pennington Nexus? They owned their building. A shimmering glass skyscraper with rooftop gardens and a lobby installation that probably cost more than Sienna's Tesla. I checked in at reception and was quickly met by a sharply dressed woman named Nira. She introduced herself as Miles's executive coordinator. Mr. Pennington is expecting you, Mr. Barrett, she said. Not Logan. Not Sienna's husband. Just Mr. Barrett. And I swear, in that moment, it felt like I was getting my name back. We took the elevator to the 24th floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a space flooded with light. Open concept, plants everywhere, people walking with purpose. No one looked beaten down or worn out. They looked like they belonged there, like they had a say in their futures. Miles was already waiting at the entrance of a modest yet sleek corner office overlooking the river. Logan, he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. Thanks for coming on short notice. Thanks for having me, I replied. And for the record, don't hold the blazer against me, I joked as I sat down. I may have overdressed. Miles chuckled. I respect a man who shows up prepared. We didn't dive into any presentations. No slideshow. No printed resume. Just two professionals sitting face to face. Men who'd known of each other's work from across the industry for years. I heard about your departure from Laquelle, Miles said after a pause. I raised an eyebrow. Word gets around that fast? He nodded. It wasn't my place to say anything Tuesday, but yes, I knew. Actually, that's part of why I bumped this meeting up. I didn't say anything. I let him keep going. We've been reassessing our agency partnerships for a while now, he explained. Markwell's work had its moments, but the inconsistency? That stopped the minute you left. Your replacement didn't just drop the ball, they fumbled it completely. That quick, huh? I asked, skeptical. We track everything, he replied matter-of-factly. It took less than 48 hours to see the dip. He leaned forward, folded his hands, and looked me straight in the eye. I'll cut to the chase. This isn't an interview. It's an offer. I blinked. He wasn't joking. Miles reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder, opened it, and slid it across the table. Director of Strategic Development. You'd build and lead our internal marketing division from scratch, he said. Total freedom. Full authority. No restrictions. The salary details are in there. Take the evening to think it through. I looked down, and the numbers staring back at me? It was nearly double what I was making at Laquelle. Honestly, it was more than I ever dared ask Sienna for, because I already knew what that conversation would turn into. Accusations of bias. Nepotism. Drama. Miles leaned back, giving me a moment to let it all sink in. This isn't a favor, he said. It's a fair offer. Market rate, based on your results. You're not sitting here because you're free. You're here because we've been watching and waiting. I swallowed, not from nerves, but from the weight of being seen for the first time in what felt like forever. I wasn't just being tolerated. I was wanted. Can I be honest with you? I asked. Please, he said. I tapped the offer sheet gently. This is the first time in 3 years someone looked at my work and said it had value, without making me feel like I was asking for too much. Miles didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just nodded and said, then let this be the last time you settle. I took the folder and tucked it under my arm. I didn't sign it on the spot. Not because I had doubts, but out of respect. Out of the need to make this decision fully, not as a rebound, not out of spite. As I stepped outside, the late afternoon sun caught the river just right. I paused and stared out across the water. I remembered something Sienna once said when I pitched the idea of working directly with Pennington Nexus. They're out of our league, Logan. Now, I was walking out of their headquarters with a director-level offer, and she didn't have a clue what was heading her way. It took 3 days. That's all it took for a ripple to become a wave. On paper, it looked like nothing special, just another account shifting from one agency to another. Happens all the time in the business world, right? But this account? It made up nearly 37% of Laquelle's annual revenue. So yeah, it didn't just sting, it carved deep. And when that account walked away because the strategist who built it was escorted out like a security risk, that wasn't just a business hit. That was personal. I was sitting at my new desk at Pennington Nexus when the official notice went out. And yes, my desk. Not a borrowed corner. Not a dusty cubicle. A real office. Sleek walnut desk. Floor-to-ceiling window. An actual door that closed. The nameplate outside read, Logan Barrett, Director of Strategic Development. It still didn't feel real. Not until 11:25 a.m. That's when I got the CC. Subject line, Transition of Services. From CEO, Pennington Nexus, to Sienna Grayson, CEO, Laquelle and Company. CC, Logan Barrett, Director of Strategic Development. Dear Ms. Grayson, following an internal review and a shift in strategic direction, Pennington Nexus has decided to terminate our agency partnership with Laquelle and Company, effective immediately. We appreciate the contributions of your team over the past several years and wish you continued success. All live campaigns and marketing assets will transition to our newly formed internal department, led by Mr. Logan Barrett. Please ensure secure transfer of all materials by end of day Friday. Regards. Miles Pennington, CEO, Pennington Nexus. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Not out of shock, but because the timing was poetic. This wasn't just news in her inbox. This was a meteor crashing through Sienna's boardroom, her projections, her Friday reports. And the best part? I hadn't said a single word against her. Hadn't lobbied to take Laquelle down. Hadn't asked Miles to cut ties. I didn't scheme. I just existed, and that alone was enough. A knock at my door pulled me out of the moment. It was Tessa, one of my new team leads. Smart. Fast. The kind of person you don't need to explain things to twice. Everything good, she asked. I smiled. Better than good. Things are finally moving. She nodded. Just got added to the transition channel. I'll start compiling the asset checklist. Thanks, Tessa. Appreciate it. After she left, I opened Slack. The internal channel was buzzing with quiet messages from old contacts still at Laquelle. Jared, design, just saw the news. That's gotta hurt over there. UX lead, you're steering the ship now, huh? Accounts, Sienna's office door hasn't opened all morning. Everyone's pretending they don't know why. The irony? Too perfect. She'd fired me for disloyalty. Now she was losing the biggest client Laquelle had because of it. Some call that karma. Some call it justice. Some call it the boomerang effect. Me? I call it clarity. She didn't just fire an employee. She threw away her best player. And when you cut your MVP, you better be ready for the stands to go empty. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize that. At exactly 2:21 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. I didn't need to guess. Sienna, I assume you had something to do with this. No, hello. No, how are you? Just accusation. Just control. I stared at it. Thought about replying with something calm, maybe a line like, only thing I did was my job. Just not for you anymore. But I didn't send anything. I left her on read. Because sometimes, silence speaks the loudest. By Friday morning, I didn't need an insider to update me. The whole industry was talking. Markwell and Company, once a rising star in regional branding, was now the subject of whispered conversations and subtle glances across conference tables. No headlines. No formal scandal. Just that thick corporate hush, the kind that smells like smoke, even when you can't see the fire. And at the center of it all, Sienna Grayson, the woman who used to hold court in every room she entered, was now struggling just to keep the floor. And I didn't need to hear the exact words to know it. I'd been at Laquelle long enough to predict exactly how the whispers would go. They lost the Nexus account? That's nearly a third of their Q2 pipeline. Wait, wasn't that her husband managing it? Yeah, that part was spreading too. People were talking. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of petty satisfaction. Either way, it was out there. I confirmed the facts to a few key clients. No spin, just the truth. And once word got around that Sienna had fired her own husband, the lead strategist on Pennington Nexus, just 3 days before the contract was pulled, that didn't scream leadership. It screamed something else entirely. Emotional instability. Per judgment. At Pennington Nexus, no one was popping champagne. That's not how we rolled. Miles wasn't dancing in the hallway, and my team wasn't sending sly emails. We were focused, head down, getting the transition done right. No mess. No drama. No revenge tour. But if I said I didn't feel the symmetry of it all, I'd be lying. Around noon, I got a Slack ping from Tessa. FYI, Sienna's requesting a Zoom to talk through the timeline. Want me to handle it? I wrote back. You can take it. Keep it polite. Keep it tight. Nothing extra. She sent back a thumbs up emoji. That was that. Professional. Clean. Precise. Just how I wanted it. But then, a few minutes later, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from Aria over at Markwell, who was looped into some of the account transitions. Sienna's pacing like a caged animal. Their CMO just stormed out of a meeting. It's full meltdown. I didn't respond. Not because I was indifferent. I just didn't feel the need to comment. Sienna had made her move. She labeled my quiet job search as betrayal, wrapped it in the flag of corporate loyalty. But what she really did was cut loose the one person keeping the foundation steady. And now, the cracks were showing. Late that afternoon, Leah, the UX lead from my old team, sent me a photo. Grainy, but clear enough. It was the Laquelle strategy room whiteboard. Header, Q2 revenue goals. Under it, red flagged clients. 3 names circled in red. At the very top, Pennington Nexus, terminated. I stared at it for a while. Not with smugness, but with clarity. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't whispered in Miles's ear. I didn't poison the well. I just walked away and did my job better somewhere else. The truth had done the rest. And now the company I'd spent half a decade helping to build, client by client, campaign by campaign, was starting to unravel. Because the one person who should have protected its foundation let her ego pull out the keystone. You know the saying. The fish rots from the head. As the day wrapped, Miles stepped into my office. You good with the timeline? He asked casually. Yeah, I said. We're ahead of schedule. Team's killing it. He leaned against the doorframe and gave me that look he had when something was coming. Sienna reached out this morning. Super polite. cold as ice. Asked if we'd reconsider. I raised a brow. Miles smirked. I told her 75% of the materials have already moved over. And I told her our early metrics are already improving. Thanks to you. He paused. She didn't respond. I nodded. Not surprised. Miles, I said, if you ever think I need a break or want space from this mess, let me know. He gave me a firm look. That's not going to be necessary. But thanks. I know this stuff can get personal. I smiled. It used to be. No? It was just business. And I meant it. Because somewhere between being fired by the woman I thought I'd grow old with and being hired by someone who actually respected my value, I stopped needing closure. I didn't need Sienna to say sorry. I didn't need Laquelle to crash and burn. All I needed was space to rise. And now I had it. Monday morning started exactly how I liked it. Quiet. Focused. I sipped my coffee. No heart-racing anxiety. No dread behind a closed glass door. No tiptoeing around Sienna's mood swings. My office door? It stayed open because I wanted it that way. Just before 9 a.m., I saw a new message come in. It stood out. Sender, Gavin Whitmore. Subject, request for meeting. Urgent. Now that was unexpected. Gavin Whitmore was a shark in a designer suit, one of the founding members of Laquelle. He didn't get involved in internal affairs unless something was on fire. And I had a pretty good guess what was burning now. I opened the email. Dear Mr. Barrett, I hope you're well. I understand there was an incident last week involving your departure from Laquelle & Company, and I'd like to speak with you directly regarding this matter. Please let me know if you'd be available today or tomorrow at your convenience. Regards. Gavin Whitmore, Senior Board Member, Laquelle & Company. It was smooth, polished, and desperate. I smiled, but didn't answer immediately. I finished my coffee, took a call with Tessa to prep for the upcoming brand rollout. Went over some numbers with Dev, knocked out a few internal approvals. Only after my house was in order. Did I answer the one that once tried to evict me? Thank you for reaching out. I'm available for a brief phone call at 4:30 p.m. today. Let me know if that works. Logan Barrett. He replied in 6 minutes flat. That told me everything I needed to know. At 4:31 sharp, my phone rang. Mr. Barrett, Gavin said. Voice slick. Practiced. Appreciate you taking the call. Of course, I said calmly. What can I help you with? I'll be direct, he said. I've reviewed your personnel file, your performance history, your impact on our client portfolio. Frankly, your dismissal was a surprise. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. I also understand you've accepted another position. That's correct. A leadership role, I assume? You assume right. There was a pause. A long one. We'd like to offer you reinstatement, he said. Full salary adjustment. Promotion to Senior VP of Strategic Growth. And a 15% signing bonus if you choose to return. On paper? It sounded good. But paper doesn't tell the whole story. Gavin, I said, steady as ever. That's a generous offer. But I've moved on. I'm leading a division now. I have real ownership. A team I believe in. And I'm building something that's mine. Another pause. This one colder. This isn't just about you, he said, dropping the polished tone. We're trying to preserve a structure that's coming undone. Ah, there it was. The truth. They didn't want me. They wanted what I represented. The calm. The results. The loyalty clients trusted. They were trying to patch a sinking ship. And I wasn't a patch. I understand, I said. And I wish you well. But going back would mean stepping back into a space where I wasn't seen until I left. You don't fix that with a promotion. He sighed. So there's no changing your mind? No, I said simply. But I appreciate the gesture. There was one final pause. For what it's worth, you were never the problem. I let the words sit for a beat. Then I said, I know. And I hung up. No anger. No smugness. No bitterness. Just peace. Because here's the thing about offers that come too late. They always reach out too late. Tuesday started early, just the way I like it. I've always been a fan of being the first one in. There's something calming about a quiet office before the world wakes up. The soft hum of machines powering up. The city still half asleep outside the windows. It feels like possibility is just waiting to be set in motion. I sat at the head of the long table in the strategy room. My room. Not a borrowed space. Not Sienna's overflow conference spot. Mine. Tessa was the first to walk in, followed by Wes, Bria, and Nate. My team. Smart. Experienced. Tired of bureaucracy. hungry to build something real. People who didn't want to follow, they wanted to shape. We gathered to finalize the launch of our first major in-house campaign for Pennington Nexus, a full rebrand for a tech company we'd brought on just last week. And the crazy thing? We were ahead of schedule. I couldn't remember the last time I'd said that at Laquelle. At exactly 8:32 a.m., Miles walked in holding a coffee and wearing that look he got when something was brewing. "Morning, all," he said. "Before we get into the client slate, I need your take on something, Logan." He slid a thick folder across the table and tapped the cover. Proposal evaluations. I opened it. 3 agencies had submitted. One of them? Laquelle and Company. I didn't flinch. Miles kept his tone neutral. "Their contract's up next month. They submitted a revised proposal, new strategist, tweaked pricing, bundled service packages." He didn't say it out loud, but I felt the question behind his eyes. "What do we do with the company that tossed you out?" Everyone looked at me, waiting. They were professionals, sure, but they were people too. And people are curious. I closed the folder slowly, then looked around the table. "We evaluate them like anyone else," I said. Miles tilted his head. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," I replied. "If we keep them, it's because they earned it. If we don't, it's because someone else did better. Not because of the past." Bria cracked a faint smile. Tessa gave a nod. "You sure you're good leading that?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said. "I've got a department to build. I'm not interested in revenge." But truth be told, I already knew how this was going to play out. I'd seen their proposal. I'd gone through the data. And I knew exactly who they'd assigned as the new lead, someone I'd trained a couple of years ago. A decent worker. Smart. But not ready for a campaign of this scale. The numbers were flat. The ideas? Recycled. It was paint-by-numbers strategy. So 2 days later, when Pennington's executive team made their decision, I wasn't surprised. The email was sharp, clean, direct. To Sienna Grayson. CC, Logan Barrett. Subject, Pennington Nexus, Agency Realignment. Dear Ms. Grayson, following a thorough evaluation of submitted proposals, Pennington Nexus has decided to transition its account to our internal strategic division under the leadership of Mr. Logan Barrett. We are grateful for your agency's past efforts and professionalism, and we wish you continued success with future partnerships. Please coordinate all remaining asset transfers with our team by close of business Friday. Regards. Miles Pennington, CEO, Pennington Nexus. No theatrics. No sting. Just a clean break. This wasn't revenge. It was results. No fire. No fury. Just the soft sound of a door clicking shut. I didn't need Sienna to fall apart. I didn't need her to lose everything. I just needed to win. Publicly. Calmly. With such clarity that even silence would feel like a standing ovation. At 4:59 p.m., a Slack ping came in from Tessa. Sienna's assistant responded. Asked if we could extend the deadline. I typed back. Tell her the deadline's firm. Wish her well. Then I logged off. Went home. Poured a glass of wine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to watch my back. Because I wasn't surviving someone else's system anymore. I was running my own. I never responded to Sienna's last message. I assume you had something to do with this. It sat there on my phone like a pebble dropped in a river. No splash. No ripple. Just there. I left it unread. Not to be spiteful. Just because she didn't deserve an explanation. I didn't owe her a window into the life she tried to write me out of. Into my role. My clarity. My momentum. What could I possibly say that wasn't already obvious? She'd lost Pennington Nexus. I was now overseeing everything she used to claim as her personal legacy. She didn't need an answer. She needed reflection. And I hoped, maybe behind that heavy glass office door of hers, she was finally doing just that. But deep down, I knew better. Sienna had mastered the art of ignoring guilt. She dressed it up in ambition. Called it drive. Let it poison her instincts as long as the title on the wall stayed shiny. That's why I didn't rub it in. Didn't gloat. Didn't throw her loss in her face. Because someone like her wouldn't take it as a mirror. She'd take it as a challenge. So instead of replying, I focused forward. I poured my energy into Viridian Labs, a new startup client we just signed. Sharp team out of San Diego, backed by serious funding and big ideas. They wanted to shake up data privacy, and they weren't interested in safe bets. We worked late that Thursday. Ria pitched this wild concept, turning data ownership into a digital vault, people's faces as the access keys. Wes mocked up a prototype overnight. Tessa ran a rapid survey for feedback before the weekend hit. That fire? That spark? It was everything I used to love about this work. The thrill of creating something from nothing. The electricity of being in the room before the wind hits, not after. Then the notifications started rolling in LinkedIn, Slack, Twitter. Old colleagues messaging me. Did you see the press release? Sienna stepping down. Board announced a leadership realignment. I didn't need to read the full article. The headline said enough. She wasn't fired. She was shifted. Soft language. Corporate cushioning. Refocusing on long-term vision. Temporary delegation of duties. Personal recalibration. All synonyms for the same truth. You lost the wheel. We're handing it to someone else. I leaned back in my chair and watched the city blur behind the office glass. 3 months ago, if you had told me Sienna wouldn't be running Laquelle anymore, I'd have laughed in your face. She was born for the throne. Tailored suits and sharp smiles. A woman who made power look like her birthright. But now her silence was louder than her presence had ever been. No texts. No calls. No apologies. No rewrites. And I didn't chase them either. Because closure doesn't come from the people who broke you. It comes from what you choose to do after. And I was choosing to build something better. 1 week later, I was invited to speak on a marketing panel hosted by Viridian Labs. Small venue. Smart crowd. The kind of group that cared more about the why than the well. The focus of the panel? How professionals make the leap from traditional agency setups to leading strategy in-house. Halfway through, the moderator, a sharp and steady journalist named Jenna Cartwright, turned to me. Mr. Barrett, she asked, what advice would you give to someone who keeps getting passed over? Someone who's undervalued by the very people who claim to support them. I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew exactly what not to say. I didn't mention Sienna. Didn't bring up the boardroom betrayal. Didn't name-drop Markwell or Laquelle. Instead, I said, stop waiting for recognition. Build something they can't ignore. A few heads nodded. Jenna smiled gently, like she knew there was more coming. You have to understand your worth before anyone else will, I continued. That means keeping the receipts, your wins, your numbers, your hours. Knowing exactly what you bring to the table, even if they keep yanking the chair out from under you. Jenna tilted her head. Has that been your experience? I looked out at the crowd. Rows of quiet, watching faces. It was, I said honestly. But it's not anymore. After the panel, a few attendees came up to chat. One of them was a young strategist from New York named Arjun. I've been working under a founder who sounds a lot like the one you described, he said. Brilliant, visionary, but dismissive. Everything has to go through him, even when he's wrong. I asked gently, have you started looking elsewhere? He glanced down. I have, but it feels disloyal. I gave him a small smile. There's nothing disloyal about realizing you've outgrown your cage. He looked at me like something just clicked, like his next step had finally come into focus. And in that moment, that was the real win. Not the office. Not the paycheck. It was using my story as something more than a cautionary tale. Turning it into a roadmap. Later that evening, back at home, I poured myself a drink and opened my inbox. Tucked between 2 client memos was a LinkedIn alert. Sienna Vale has updated her job title. Founder and strategic consultant, Vale Advisory Group. So she'd rebranded. Turned the fall into a pivot. No surprise there, Sienna had always been good at spinning chaos into opportunity. If anything, I respected the move. But what caught my eye wasn't her update. It was the message beneath it. From Jessica L., receptionist, Markwell. Just wanted you to know, since you left, 5 more people have followed. Aria's freelancing now. Jared's at Prism. And I'm giving my notice next week. You were the only one who ever made that place feel safe to grow. Thank you for showing us there's life after Laquelle. I read it once. Then again. And a third time. Only then did I let out one long, slow breath. Because that was the reply I never expected. It didn't come from Sienna. It came from the people who used to walk past me in those silent hallways. Who had watched me carry that cardboard box like a funeral procession through the building. Now they were building exits of their own, not in rebellion, but in realization. Sienna's mistake hadn't just been firing me. Her mistake was believing I was expendable. But the truth? I had been the glue. And once the glue was gone, things didn't implode overnight. They just quietly came undone. Like a foundation giving way under a house built too high on ego. And all I had to do was walk away. No revenge plot. No smear campaign. No viral takedown. Just results. That weekend, I met Miles and his wife for dinner. Low-key place. Candlelit. No ties. No agendas. Over appetizers, he raised his glass and said, "To peace." I clinked mine gently. "To the power of silence." He chuckled. "And to knowing when not to reply." I laughed. The greatest strategy of all. We ate, we laughed, we talked about Q3 projections and upcoming clients. And somewhere between dessert and goodbyes, I felt it. That quiet realization. You don't need to shout when you're finally being heard. 1 year later, I stood inside the same hotel ballroom where Sienna and I once attended the regional leadership gala together. I could still picture it. She wore that commanding black dress with the sharp shoulders. I'd squeezed into the only decent suit I owned, too tight at the shoulders, but clean. That night, she was called to the stage to accept the Rising Executive Award. I remember clapping harder than anyone, leaning over with pride and whispering, "That's my wife." Amazing what time does. Now I was the one walking to the stage. Same venue, different headline. Logan Barrett, finalist, Industry Vanguard Award. I stood in front of a sea of tables, executives, creatives, disruptors, polished reps with tired eyes. But this time, my suit fit perfectly. Dark charcoal, subtle lapel trim. No nerves, no weight, just breath, just clarity. I shook the presenter's hand, took the plaque, stepped up to the mic. No speech written, no index cards. I didn't need them. "Thank you." I began, scanning the crowd. A year ago, I walked out of a building with a cardboard box in one hand, and the feeling that 7 years of work had vanished in a single breath. There was a quiet shift in the room. I smiled. But the truth is, it hadn't. Because you can't erase value. You can ignore it, underpay it, pretend it doesn't exist to preserve your narrative. But real value? It doesn't disappear. It just finds a better home. I paused. I found mine at Pennington Nexus. Not because they handed me a title, but because they let me build. And building something new will always be more powerful than defending something broken. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, quiet, like people nodding at the parts of themselves they don't always say out loud. As the night wrapped and the crowd shifted toward dessert trays and coat checks, a woman approached me. Older, silver hair, emerald coat, clear eyes. Diana Morell, former board advisor at Laquelle. We'd only met once, briefly, during a quarterly review years ago. She offered her hand. "Logan," she said with a small smile. "You handled that with dignity." "Thank you," I said. "That's the only part we really get to control." She studied me for a moment, then said, "I wish we had seen it sooner." I nodded. Most people don't, until it's already walking out the door. She didn't argue, just rested a hand on my arm, then quietly stepped away. That night, I returned to an apartment that wasn't empty, just still. The kind of quiet that feels like breathing room, not absence. I poured a glass of scotch, sat by the window. The city blinked back at me through the glass. Its lights flickered like reminders. Life keeps moving, whether or not anyone's watching. Then I opened my laptop, typed in her name, Sienna Vale. Her profile had changed again. Sienna Vale, independent consultant, board advisor, keynote speaker. She was still out there, still visible, still branded. But the shine had faded. No more magazine covers calling her the next big thing. No new awards. A few scattered panel appearances, sure, but the forward motion, the spotlight? It was gone. The momentum had moved on. I clicked away, not out of bitterness, but out of closure. And then, after a year of silence, it came. No calls, no emails, no messages. Until now. "Sienna, you always said you wanted to build something. I guess I finally see what you meant. Congratulations, Logan. You earned it. I just wish I hadn't had to lose everything to understand." I stared at it. No sting, no fire in my chest, no anger, just stillness. It felt like the soft echo of a door long closed. The whisper of someone finally hearing the words you said, long after you'd stopped saying them. I didn't reply. She hadn't said, "I'm sorry," but she had said the part one did need to hear. You earned it. And somehow that was enough. For years, I convinced myself that if I just stayed loyal, stayed patient, stayed humble, eventually, I'd be seen. That Sienna would notice the weight I carried for both of us. That she'd fight for me the way I always fought for her. But she didn't. She fought for optics, for perception, for her position. And the moment she saw me as a threat to that, she cut me loose. Clean, quiet, efficient, like I was just another outdated metric in a quarterly report. What she didn't realize is that she didn't fire a strategist. She freed a leader. Because walking out of Markwell, walking out of her life, wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of it. The beginning of a version of me that didn't shrink to fit someone else's narrative. The version that didn't apologize for taking up space. And that version? He was just getting started. A week later, we hosted our first internal summit at Pennington. All departments. Full collaboration. We called it Vision Week. On the final night, over dinner, Tessa raised her glass. To Logan, she said, looking across the table. For teaching us that strategy isn't just about where we're going. It's about who we become when we get there. Glasses clinked softly around the room. And I sat there, quiet, humbled, not because they toasted me, but because they saw me, not as Sienna's husband, not as the guy who used to work in the shadows, not as the mistake that got pushed out the back door, but as the man who built a door of his own and finally walked through it. And it all came back to one phrase. The last thing I said to her in that cold office. When she slid my badge across the desk and called me disloyal. I wish you well. Back then, it sounded like a soft goodbye. Now, it sounds like a boundary. A line between the version of me that was constantly waiting to be chosen and the one who finally chose himself. Because forgiveness doesn't mean going back. And peace doesn't require you to stay close. So wherever she is now, whether she's rebuilding or retreating, I truly do wish her well. Because letting go of someone who never really saw me gave me the space to finally find someone who did. Myself. And that's the real victory. Not the office. Not the applause. Not the title or the press release. But the quiet, unshakable power of self-respect. The freedom to stand tall in a life I built on my own. And the calm, solid truth that I never needed them to begin with.